All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a regular meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is published in the local paper for notices by the township, and it's also published on the township website. And notice is also posted on the first floor of the municipal building. And the meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and also being streamed live and will be available for on demand on YouTube. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures that resemble a court of law, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial proceeding should be maintained at all times. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call, and I am here. Roll call.
Time for the roll.
Vice Chair Broda.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ianwali.
Here.
Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Ortiz is excused. Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Councilor Schlager is excused. Ms. Willis is excused. Chair Nguyen.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
And Mr. Neiman.
Here. Okay, we have minutes from our January 23rd meeting.
And comments on changes to the minutes were distributed over the weekend. Are there any additional changes or comments?
I don't know if my comment made it in this morning. I just had on page 2, the fifth paragraph down, Mr. Neiman noted his objections to the planning board resolution, noting that the redevelopment plan is not substantially inconsistent with the master plan. I thought we should just change noting to stating, because noting seems to indicate an agreement on fact, whereas stating is more Mr. Neiman stating his opinion of the master plan and consistency.
Okay.
What'd you do? Did you state or did you note?
I like to think I noted, but
I think stated.
I'll change that to stated. Stating. Any other changes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
All right. We have a resolution on 25 North Fulton Avenue.
Actually, we don't. I haven't finished it, and I've gotten Mr. Trembulak's consent to carry it until our next meeting.
Very good. All right. And that brings us to the application of 154 Pine Street. Good evening.
You may have to press the button until the light comes on.
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Now it's more green.
good evening.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Carey. I'm from Pashman Stein, Walter Hayden, here on behalf of General Grow LLC, the applicant for this evening. If I can just, Ms. Tully, I did send the affidavit of notice and publication. Were those received?
I do have
And those
both.
are in order? Okay.
And they're in order.
Thank you very much. This is an application for conditional use approval for a micro cannabis cultivation facility in a portion of the existing building at 154 Pine Street. Genuine Grow LLC is owned by Andrew Marshall, who sits next to me. He's a local resident and he wants to open his business in his hometown. He already has a conditional approval from the state for a micro cultivation license. The building is in the C2 zone where cannabis uses are conditionally permitted, which is why we're here, because it's conditionally permitted. The use is classified as light industrial / manufacturing, which is the same class of uses that has historically been at this property. The building has been there since approximately the 1940s. It's located sort of behind the CVS on Claremont Avenue, to give you a little bit of a visual. This is a straight conditional use application. Genova Grow is just a new tenant at the property. It's an existing building, and the traditional uses were the same as they are here. So it's just a change of tenant. It's not a new use to the property. They're not doing anything specific to the property for their business that would trigger a site plan approval. So we're really just here for the conditional use. If anybody has been to the site lately, you might have noticed that the owners are doing some interior renovations. The building has permits for all of those. The work was approved back in October, and it's ongoing and almost finished in certain respects. But those interior renovations are really what the owner is doing, the new owners of the property are doing, and it's not what we're here to talk to you about today, although we will, because I'm sure you'll have questions. We have reviewed the memo from Ms. Tully dated January 5th, 2023, and we're in agreement with her conclusion on page 7 that this site meets the conditions for the conditional use. And thank you for the memo. We also do understand that RailLink, the owners of the CVS property, have filed some letters with the board. And they do state in their letter, the January 17th, they're not necessarily opposed to the use, but they have questions about the site plan. In another letter they filed on the 6th and discussed some of the renovations that are going on in the property. Again, it's not what the renovations the owner is doing is not what we're here, in front of you for approval for, although we will talk to you about it. We do have the owner here if you have questions. But we believe that after we go through the operations testimony and the rest of the criteria for the conditional use, that the board will be comfortable with the application and how low this intensity really is and how it's an improvement over, although categorically similar uses, still a less intense similar use. So, we have this evening as our witnesses, Andrew Marshall, as I said, who's next to me, a local resident and the owner of Genuine Grow. He's going to go through the operations testimony briefly, just so you understand it, and then hit on some of the conditional use categories. And we want to put them on the record, even though Ms. Tully's memo was nice enough to say we comply. We want to make sure we have it on the record. We also have Dave Genova, who is the managing member of the group of companies that own the property. And he is here to the extent, like I said, that the board has questions about the ongoing just renovations to the building and any of the questions that came up as a result of the objectors' letters. Then finally, we have Peter Steck to go through the compliance with the ordinance requirements. And if you need it, we also have Sean Mack, who's another attorney from our firm, and he is the cannabis counsel. He's an attorney, but he specifically does the cannabis stuff, and he's done the application. He's worked with Andrew on the application to the town and to the state. So if you have any questions on that, I think we are the first cultivation use you've had. I know you've had retail uses before, but we wanted to cover all bases, so he's available if you desire. But I won't make your night any longer than it needs to be, so we won't put him on unless you ask. I think if it's possible, if we could start off having Andrew and maybe also David sworn in.
Before we do that, do you have exhibit list?
Yes, I have pre-marked the exhibits for this application. A1 is the application, A2 is the certification of taxes paid, A3 is the proof of publication, A4 is the affidavit of service, A5 are the documents that were submitted with this application, including photos and descriptions and plan sections. It was stamped November 18th.
Janice and Arthur, I apologize. I actually have a conflict I was not aware of until just now, so I'll have to recuse myself from further participation in this application.
Okay.
All right.
I'll note that.
Still set.
And let me finish my list. A6 is the planning report dated January 5th, 2023. A7 is the property survey dated December 14th, 2021 by Pronesti Engineering.
Excuse me, can you turn off the microphones? I cannot hear this.
If you keep the microphones
Closer.
closer
I
to
can hear.
you,
I
we'll be
apologize.
able to hear better. So just put it as close to your mouth as possible.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
It's very muffled.
Is this better? Would I keep it closer?
I'm sorry?
Was this better when I keep the microphone closer?
Yes.
Okay, terrific.
Sir, if I could ask you to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Sure. It's Andrew Marshall. I'm the CEO and founder of Genuine Grow, and the address is 5 Cornell Way, Montclair.
Andrew, if you could just go through and explain to the board a little bit, this is as I said, this is a micro cannabis cultivation facility. And the micro is maybe something new to the board, if you can explain what that means.
Sure. So we're classified as a micro business, which is basically a small local business defined by the CRC, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, as having less than 2,500 square feet of cannabis operation space, less than 10 employees, and for a cultivator, no more than 1,000 mature cannabis plants per month. So this is a small operation by nature and by the license class. We will be, as a Class 1 cultivator, we will be growing cannabis and packaging cannabis for sale to local retailers and manufacturers licensed by the CRC.
And I should have started with this. The notice was provided, but we also, in addition to the normal notice, you provided a letter to the neighbors introducing yourself, and we also sent, in addition to the tax list, we sent that letter to the actual property addresses to make sure that the people who live there, if they're tenants, received it as well. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So as far as the operations, the number, you're limited in the number of employees you're allowed to have, but what do you actually perceive for your business?
Sure. So right now I'm planning to have anywhere between 2 to 6 employees on any shift, but I'd like to clarify that number. Part of our hiring initiative is that we're going to be hiring employees who are on the autism spectrum. We're going to be working with a nonprofit organization called READ Autism Services, RED. They will be assisting us in training and implementing these individuals into our workforce. Those individuals will be transported in a group by READ Autism Services, so they will not be parking on site.
Okay. And that's on, they're going to come in on certain days when you're harvesting, correct? And on other days, you're going to have less people at the site?
Correct.
On a normal day, how many employees would you perceive would be there at any time?
Probably a max 3.
And the hours of operation?
So Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, Saturday, 9 to 5, and Sunday, 10 to 4.
Okay. And do you expect to have any large truck deliveries or a lot of vehicles going back and forth?
No. For deliveries, we expect to maybe have agricultural supplies be delivered at most twice a month, but I also intend to do that shopping at local stores myself because it's such a small business. I don't need pallets coming in of supplies. So those are the only deliveries that we'll be taking.
Okay. And you do plan to have your own van for the business's use, and how is that going to be used?
Correct. We'll have a company van used for transport of cannabis goods between licensees as governed by the CRC.
And what is the status of your approvals? I kind of hinted on it, but why don't we put it on as testimony from you?
Sure. So Genuine Grow at the October 28th meeting of 2022 was awarded a conditional license for cultivation. That license was officially issued in November. It expires this May. The license is conditional in the sense that I need approval from this board and approval from the Township Council on my cannabis application. Once I have those 2 approvals, I will go back to the CRC to submit an application to convert my conditional license to an annual license. Once I have the annual license approval from the CRC, we will continue building out the space and then come back to Montclair for final approval of the license and site inspections and then open up.
Thank you. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview so you understand what the business involves, and then we can go into the conditional use requirements. We did submit, as you said, a number of documents with our application. And as I said, the planning review letter does indicate that the applicant, based on what was submitted, appears to comply with the conditional uses. And not to take your evening on all these details, since they are submitted in the documents and agreed to, I'm just going to read off a few of them, if you can, for the record, tell us if we comply with these or not.
Sure.
So first is the location. We're not within 250 feet of a K through 12 school or a licensed daycare facility, correct?
Correct. The nearest school is the Duran School, which is, I believe, 1,060 feet away, and then the nearest licensed child care center is Succeed Together on Pine Street, which is over 1,700 feet away.
Okay. And the facility is not going to be in a house or in a mobile vehicle, correct?
No, it will not.
And you're not located on Walnut Street?
Correct. It is on Pine Street.
So to me, we've got my firm has gone in front of a number of boards, and usually what boards want to know about is the odor mitigation and the security and maybe some signage. So we'll give a little more detail on those. The ordinance does require that you provide for odor mitigation, and we did submit some lengthy documents as to how you're going to do that. Can you give a quick summary to the board, hinting on giving them the highlights and telling the layers of control that you have as far as odor mitigation?
Sure. So all around the country, you have cannabis cultivation facilities mixed in with residential and commercial areas, such as 154 Pine Street, and they're all successfully operating due to proper odor mitigation and air control. So that will be the same for 154 Pine Street. We will have proper odor mitigating systems that will be scrubbing the air inside and cleaning the air, and with effective odor mitigation, you can completely eliminate the odor inside the facility.
And you're going to have a maintenance plan as far as keeping up all those, the equipment that you have in there. There's a,
Correct. We have SOPs, standard operating procedures laid out for the odor mitigation equipment. They will have weekly checks, even more so than the equipment is recommended to have.
we certainly, we'll continue to go through this, but if the board has any questions, you're certainly welcome to
Yeah, I have a
ask.
question. Does that odor mitigation equipment make a lot of noise?
No, it does not.
Is that something that's verified, or, because you're right in a residential area, and
The
I'm
equipment
concerned.
the equipment is internalized. It will not make large noises. I've been to larger facilities. The larger facilities have larger odor mitigating equipment. Those do make noise, but still noise that's kept within the facility. You don't hear it outside.
And you would be required to comply with the noise ordinances of the town. If there's something were to go wrong, something was to break and need maintenance, you would fix it, and then you would need to comply with the noise ordinances that are applicable in the town, correct?
Yes, correct. But I don't anticipate noise being generated from the odor mitigating equipment. It's quiet machines.
Do you have any equipment that will be outside,
No,
like air conditioning units or anything like that?
I can't speak on the air conditioning of the building of the property. Mr. Genova might be able to touch on that. But in terms of the odor mitigation equipment, it'll be inside the grow rooms and the hallways and the facility. And in addition, there's going to be an airlock at the door that will retain the pressure inside the facility, similar to a department store. So when you open the doors, all that pressure stays inside.
You're giving us a little bit of a taste of what actually goes on inside, but we're still, right, no pun intended. But we're still pretty much in the dark about what exactly is going on inside a grow facility. I, for one, don't have a clue. So could you kind of map that out for us? How is it laid out, exactly what's done inside, what kind of equipment is being used, what other things like fertilizer or dirt or whatever, what actually goes on inside.
Do you want me to go through the floor plan?
Yeah, I was
Before
gonna
you
say,
answer,
can we
I
pull
just
up the
have
floor plan?
I think,
Art, so Mr. Mack, co-counsel, and I practiced law together at the same firm for about 9 years, 17 years ago. I just want to put that on the record. I don't consider that a basis for, hi, good to see you. We haven't seen each other in low those 17 years. Yes, that gentleman, right, low these past 17 years. I don't see that as a need to recuse, but I do want to put on the record that his co-counsel and I
And I
practiced law
appreciate
together.
it. I think it's so far.
I
removed,
concur, but I
appreciate it.
did want to get your concurrence on that, so I will participate, so thank you.
just another question. So what you're selling is the plant itself?
Correct. So once the bud is harvested, it's then hung up to dry. It cures, and then from there, it's trimmed up, it's packaged up. Between all that, it gets tested as well by a licensed laboratory, and then once it's packaged up, it's ready to sell to local retailers and local manufacturers.
Okay, thank you.
And there's no retail sales from the property, correct?
Correct. And we will never be open to the public as well.
What'd you say?
We will never be open to the public,
Oh,
and there
okay.
will be no sales straight to consumer. We will only be selling to retailers.
I know you talked about, may I ask a question? You opened saying that there's other work going on in the building, but this doesn't apply to that. But where were those permits, just so we know for background information,
Right.
where were those permits applied for, and what permits were given for that work?
After Mr. Marshall goes through the testimony regarding the business, I was going to bring up Dave Genova, who is one of the owners of the property, and he can answer all those questions. If that's okay, if we put it off to kind of,
Yeah, thank you.
we'll get through these questions and then go back to you, if you don't mind.
So I actually have a question.
Sure.
The people who work there, these plants are just growing, right? I mean, that's just what happens. They get planted and they just grow. What do the people do? I think that was the chair's question. What goes on?
Sure. So, and that's why it's a small number of employees, because when the plants are growing, outside of cleaning and tending to things around the facility, there's definitely not a lot going on. I would say, and anybody who works in a cultivation facility would tell you this as well, cleaning is probably the biggest thing that goes on. You're just constantly cleaning. Surfaces are being cleaned. You're wiping down pots. You're wiping down equipment. So that's one of the biggest things that goes on, is constant cleaning. Once we get in the swing of things, we'll be packaging flour on a more consistent basis. But yes, we're most of the day just tending to the plants, checking temperature controls throughout the rooms, checking the water, the nutrients, things like that.
I think you said at one point, there was going to be a security guard there at all times. Is that true?
No.
That's not true.
Only as recommended or required by the CRC or Montclair Police Department will we have security guards, and if we do, they will not be armed.
Oh, okay.
There will be significant security, however. Your answer is specifically to a person guard,
guards.
right?
Correct.
I'm sorry, what?
Were you asking about guards?
Security, what kind of security guard? I thought there was a security person there at all times. That's not true.
We won't have a guard at all times. No.
Okay.
But we do have a significant security plan, and you've hired an independent agency that is frankly regarded as one of the best in the business for providing your security plan, correct?
Yeah, correct. We've contracted with Sapphire Risk, who is nationally recognized as a security consulting firm in the cannabis industry. They've assisted in over 33 states. They've done 400 security plans, over 70 build-outs. And so they've assisted us with the security plan as part of the state and town application that we submitted to the township and the police department, and they will be assisting us in putting out RFPs to build out the facility once it comes down with a local contractor.
And will some of that involve changing those windows? Because it's all surrounded by windows. Are you going to leave all those windows there?
The windows are going to be treated so that no light is coming into the rooms, but we're keeping the windows as is.
Okay.
Since we're on the security topic, do you want to give a little bit more as to exactly what's going to be the cameras and and how your backup systems?
Yeah, sure. You've heard this before, but we're going to have the full bells and whistles of security, alarms, panic buttons, cameras, motion sensors, detectors, backup programs, cybersecurity measures in place to protect employee sensitive information. We will have a steel cage for cannabis storage in the storage room. All rooms are only accessible through a key card reader, and all entries are logged, and the doors are basically made so the person who is on shift can only get into that room that he's allowed to get into on that shift, and that shift only. So we have a lot of safeguards in place, and again, we've contracted with the best in the business for this plan.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Teller, for bringing up so I think the other floor plan, the one that was at the end of is easier.
What do you want me to bring up? Want me to bring up
A genuine growth plan.
The floor plan that's at the end of the 4 pictures, yeah.
is this what you want?
Yeah, I think that's the better one. For the board, this was submitted with the application. Do you have copies? I do have extra copies if you don't have your in front of you. Do you need a close-up, or you're good? Okay.
This is one of the sheets in A5.
Right, this is the last sheet in A5.
And you'll need either the portable mic if you're going to talk, or you have to talk from the podium. Well,
So Andrew, if you could start by just pointing out which portion of the facility you're going to be using. And just for the board to understand, this is the back half of the property. And Mr. Genova can talk about it more. There will be 3 or 4 tenants in this property. You're one of them, and this is to the back half of the property, and you're on the right side in the back. Correct?
Yeah, correct. Can you hear me? So we're in the back, as Kelly mentioned, of 154 Pine Street. It's cut off right here, but right under here is our break room. Yep. So we've got a break room right there, locker rooms. So how it'll work is the parking lot's over here. Employees will come in. This is our main entrance door. That's a steel-resistant door. Cameras all right here. And can you scroll up again? Yep. Sorry. So this is the main bulk of the operations. These are the 2 growing rooms. And then this is the vegetative and nursery space. So essentially those are where the plants are born, and then they grow, and then as they grow to transfer to flower, they are transferred to these rooms. Once the plants are done growing in these rooms, typical harvest is anywhere from 60 to 70 days, depending on the strain. So once the plants are done in that room, they are then brought to this room to dry. Once they're done drying, they are brought to the cure and trimming room, where they're then cured and trimmed. This is the storage room, where I mentioned we have the cannabis storage. This is my office. And then right here is a water tank filter area. So essentially that's where our water and nutrients are held. And then there's an irrigation system that'll be pumped over to all these rooms to feed the plants on their benches their water and nutrients.
Is
are
it
there any questions
overhead,
about the floor
an
plan?
overhead water, or is it irrigated?
No, so the plants are basically on benches, essentially. And then the water is brought in and through drip irrigation system straight into the plants. Yeah. The piping will probably be overhead or along the wall, though.
So on the plan, it says no window.
So when we say
What does
that,
that
and this
mean?
was just for our architects, but when I mean that, so we're leaving the sunlight to go into here, but for the grow rooms, we can't have light or temperature coming in. So that's why we're treating the windows from the inside and leaving them as is on the exterior of the property.
Actually, I'm concerned about someone breaking a window and entering. That's why I keep asking about that.
If your security, if Sapphire says that they need to be blocked on the inside with something more than just a colored film, you'll do that, right?
I believe we're doing, I don't want to, okay.
Is it safe to say it's going to be more than just glass? That's
Yeah, and if someone were to do that, there would be a lot of action in place that would come following a break-in into the facility. But there's, and even in the storage room, the walls are bulletproof. So, yeah.
And for the board, and Andrew wants to share everything with you and all this, and he's worked so hard and is excited about it, but I keep telling him your security details need to be secure. So we'd like to share with you what we can, but we don't want to give too much away because this is an open public hearing, this is recorded, and even in the documents we submitted, we tried to do an overview. We didn't give you a full security floor plan. It does exist. The state has seen it. It's part of what had to go in to the state, but the documents to this board are operable, and that's just too much of a security risk. So, if the board really had a specific concern, we could maybe have, one professional look at it, or but certainly he's going to work with the local police, and we're going to do whatever they recommend.
Are there any questions about the floor plan?
Is there any other equipment? Any other equipment in the facility in addition to the irrigation equipment and your air filtration system?
Sure. In the grow rooms, we'll have lights over all the plants, LED grow lights for cultivation. So those act as the sun environment in the rooms. Outside of the lights, the irrigation, the electrical component, where if you scroll right up there, there's an electrical room in between the veg and the nursery. Yep, so right there is the electrical room. But outside of the irrigation, the lights, and the benches, and the odor mitigation, that's the bulk of the equipment. Correct.
Is there any need in this kind of operation for a generator in case you lose electricity and your plants aren't, watered or light isn't there? I mean, does it matter?
Yeah, the generator is part of the backup power loss for the security system.
Oh, you do have a generator.
It has to be for the security system.
And that's inside?
I'm not sure where it will be placed, but
Yep.
we will have one.
Yeah, because I'm concerned, because you're next to residential areas, and where you're going to put a generator. It's loud, that's all.
Yeah, I can't speak where it will go right now, but there will be a generator. But I don't anticipate it being a massive generator.
And the generator will only be used in case of emergencies. It's not something that's going to be used on a regular basis.
Yeah, it would only kick in if there was a power loss.
Is that generator for the whole building?
Just my suite,
Just your suite, so it'll be internal to your suite?
correct?
And the generator is to maintain the security system. It's not to run everything.
Correct.
But is it gasoline-powered generator, or is it?
I believe electric.
I mean,
But that, the
gas-
exact generator has not been picked out yet.
I mean, a gas generator, not because if electricity goes off. Gas.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So
That's
I
what
think
you wrote
what's
in your
going
notes.
on is we know it has to be outside, and it's not shown, and I think that's what's, I mean, because it's,
It
there
seems like it would
there's
have
no
to
such
be.
thing as an inside generator, so it's got to be an outside generator, and the question is where.
Are you using like a solid-state backup?
What was that?
A solid-state backup generator?
I'm
Power
not,
supply, you're doing an internal power supply. So is it solid-state?
for the generator
No,
or the power? I'm not sure.
Yeah, the generator.
Okay.
Like
Sounds like a question.
like an internal Tesla battery. Are you using something like that, or?
I honestly don't, I don't know.
Okay.
We don't have the exact generator picked out yet.
But there is an ability to do a battery backup system with some of these security plans that Sapphire does.
Correct.
Okay, so if that's something that has to be done instead of a generator, if
Be
there's,
able to do it.
we'd be able to do it. It's
Yeah,
something
the
that they have-
concern is the noise for a generator would make the residents that are like, what, 10 feet away on your right side as you're looking at it?
Sure, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't want to, oh, it was on. I don't think we want to get, I mean, I think the moral of the story is, for something like this, chances are a battery backup plan for this kind of electricity is not going to be something that's feasible, because even if it would give you a few hours, it wouldn't save you from Hurricane Sandy and 12 days of powerlessness. And so I
Right.
suspect that when push comes to shove, you're going to find out that there needs to be an outside generator, and I think that the concern is a sound one, no pun intended, that,
Right.
you know, that generator will need to be bigger than you think it is for all of the wattage you're gonna need, and that it, you know, it's something that's worth kind of thinking about where it's gonna live. I agree, I don't disagree with you, it's only gonna kick in when the power goes out, but
Right.
it's not a small matter.
I guess the
And-
issue with the generator is that does trigger site plan review.
Right. So I know that in other facilities, they've agreed to do a battery backup system. And in most cases, the battery backup is long enough to get you through most events. And they've then just had a generator available off-site to be brought in the case of a Hurricane Sandy, when usually towns allow you to have those when you usually wouldn't have them anyway, like in a real emergency. So it's certainly, if the board, you know, wanted to make that some kind of a condition, that we would need to review where that was going to go, and that the building department is going to go through and make sure it's in a place. Whatever we put in is not triggering something that something would have to do. Yeah, I mean, if it has to be done, it has to be. If it has to be, the battery backup system is probably more expensive, which is why it's not first offered, I would think, by Sapphire for a small facility like this. But if that's going to be an issue, then we'll have to make the determination, and then if it can't be done, then they would have to come back to the board.
Right, and that would be separate from
Yeah.
the conditional use permit.
Yeah. All right, lots more to talk about. Well, where you're up there, they had asked about the odor mitigation, so maybe just kind of point to the rooms where you're focusing on controlling the odor and where the equipment's going to go.
For sure. So the main odor equipment will be in the two flower rooms, but we will have machines in each room. So you'll have machines in this room, this room, this room, this room, this room, this room, this room. When I say machines, I have pictures of the products actually in the odor mitigation, but essentially they're smaller than that mini split, and they'll suck in the air within the room, and they'll put out clean air while eliminating the odor. And then here at this door and at the door going out to the facility will be the airlock, as I mentioned, and that's the airlock that keeps the air pressure within the facility. We won't need odor mitigation equipment in the break room or locker rooms.
So the air purification system doesn't draw in outside air?
No, correct. It basically just takes the air inside,
Microphone.
traps the odor while cleaning the air and putting out clean air into the facility.
And you're not going to be open, one of the other conditions, you're not going to be open to the public at any point, correct?
Never open to the public.
In fact, the door to this facility is on the side of the building. It's not even visible from the street, is that correct?
Yes, correct. It's in the parking lot, which is right here.
Okay. And one of the requirements is that your sign, the size of the sign. You're going to have an 8x5 by 11 sign, basically size of the sheet of paper.
Correct.
And where's that
Conforming
gonna
with
go?
the sign code in 347, it'll be right next to the door, essentially acting as a directory, and it'll just list Genuine Grow LLC, Andrew Marshall as the emergency contact, and my phone number.
And then the one other conditional use requirement is the record retention, and that's required by the state, and it's also mentioned in the local ordinance. You're going to maintain records of everything that goes in and out of the property, and those will be available, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. And we'll be using the state's inventory tracking system, Metric, so that essentially tracks the seed to sale. So every plant is tracked, every batch of cannabis is tracked from when it's produced, every product is tracked, and every batch has to get tested. And then those records will be made available to Montclair or the CRC upon request. Yes.
And we talked a little bit about how you're local. You went to high school here, right?
Correct.
And
Class
you're
of 2013.
And you're planning to live nearby as well?
Yeah, if I'm able to open up, I hope to move into the neighborhood.
And we talked about working with Reed. You also made a commitment to Montclair Housing Commission to be a good neighbor. You want to talk about that as well? I know they issued a resolution endorsing your business.
Yes, actually, last week the Housing Commission issued a resolution supporting Genuine Grow. Genuine Grow is going to be donating $15,000 a year to the Affordable Housing Fund, in addition to other programs in Montclair as part of our community givebacks. And that's in addition to the work we'll be doing with Reed and hiring adults with autism.
Did you say 15 or 50?
1-5.
1-5, thank you.
Does the board have any other questions on I think that covers the conditional use part. We're going to have Mr. Steck come up and go through it from the planning perspective on that, but I believe we've hit on all of the parts of the ordinance that we're required to do for the conditional use. We will bring up Mr. Genova to talk about the property because I know the board's interested. But is there any other questions as to the conditional use portion?
I just had a question about the airlock. How does that work?
In terms of how the airlock actually works, I can't speak on that, but it's so essentially it'll be placed by the doors, and it's designed to keep the air pressure within the facility.
So doesn't that mean you need some sort of fan or connection to the outside or another tenant space to hold the pressure in?
I can't speak to the technology, how it's actually functioning, the airlock. I just know that at the door, you're able to retain the air pressure within, and that where that is a common corridor. So that one airlock it's a common corridor, right there. Yes.
Yes, your airlock.
The airlock right there, and then also further down by the entrance, right there.
And Angie, when you researched for this, you found that this is common, that all cannabis facilities that are functioning correctly, at least the cultivation ones, have used this pressurized air system, correct?
Correct.
So there are companies out there that can help you build this and facilitate and make sure it works correctly.
Correct, and we're working with consultants from Colorado who are helping us design and build out the facility, from everything from the cultivation, the grow mediums, the nutrients, to the odor and the HVAC.
Why do you need an airlock?
Because we want to keep, we want to keep the air pressure and that air within the facility.
Oh, it's part of the odor control thing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
There has to be some way to get fresh air, though, inside the facility. There has to be, otherwise, I think there would be a health issue. You can't have an area where people are working that's totally sealed from the outside unless they are, particularly if they're going to be in there, as you say, cleaning and tending and doing stuff like that. And so there has to be some outside air exchange system. And, that's not necessarily incompatible with keeping a certain amount of pressure. But you've indicated that you're not sure about the technology. I'm just, I'm not familiar with the technology either, but it seems to me as a matter of health issues that there would have to be some sort of air exchange to make sure, because everything that's in that room is generating VOCs and stuff. So there has to be a way to clean that out. Otherwise, could be a potentially lethal.
Andrew, is that in your research, did you find that that's part of the maintenance of those, of the odor reduction machines and the carbon filters? Is that part of what those are designed to do, and why?
Yeah.
And it partially, as much as the smell is an issue, it is also to keep the employees safe, correct?
Yeah, and we'll have, there is going to be a new HVAC system built into that space. It's important to note how critical temperature control is for cannabis. Every room is going to be a different temperature.
And the HVAC system requires an outside air
So
exchange in order to function properly.
In your odor control plan, there was pictures of boxes, and those are really, that's the part that takes care of the particulates and the VOCs, right? And that's the part that has the filters that need to be changed on a regular basis.
Correct.
So is that the part that's addressing?
Those are
what
not
you-
connected to those are not connected to the main system.
Right, and that's the part that my understanding is your understanding, that complies with like the OSHA requirements for the clean air for the employees.
Yes.
And you're going to make sure you hire a company who has experience and expertise in this and does it correctly.
Yeah, correct. We are going to be building this out, like I said, in working with consultants who are very who have a lot of expertise on this subject. So there will be no corners cut from security to odor, because those are definitely the two biggest concerns that regulators have, and I'm not cutting any corners there. So.
And it's not just Montclair that's concerned about that, it's part of your state license requirements to keep up with security and odor control as well, correct?
Yes, correct. All those plans are submitted to the state as well.
And the state can stop by unannounced and make inspections of the property, correct?
They can come anytime, and they will also have, as part of the security plan, a video feed to them 24/7, as well as our security monitoring company 24/7, and the Montclair Police Department will also have access to that feed 24/7.
And like we said, you're going to live nearby, so if there's any issue, your neighbor is going to be nowhere to find you, correct?
Correct. I'm the emergency contact person, and I'll be giving my contact information to all residents and police within 100 feet of the property per the CRC rules.
Thank you.
You want to continue with the testimony, Counselor?
Okay, well, no, I wanted to see if there's any more questions as far
I
as
don't
the
think there's any
conditional
more
use.
questions from the board right
Okay.
at this point. There's members of the public that we'll get to at the end
Okay.
of the full testimony. So,
Sure. Well, as far as the conditional use, we've covered all the categories that are in the conditional use. So I was going to give Mr. Marshall a break and bring up the owner of the property.
okay, so if you're going to switch off then,
Yeah.
before you do that, then if there aren't any other questions from the board, if there are members of the public who would like to question this witness about what he's testified to this evening.
I do have one question about whatever chemicals you're using. Are there any chemicals being used that have to be handled in any particular way?
Chemicals for the cannabis?
Yeah.
No. So we plan on growing organically in soil, and the only nutrients there are liquid nutrients that are added to them, but they're not chemically hazardous or anything. They're just regular plant nutrients that you would buy at a horticulture hydroponic store. There will be no fertilizer, as Mr. Nguyen asked about earlier as well, because we're growing fully organic.
All right. So as I was saying, if there are members of the public that have questions of this witness about his testimony this evening, please step forward.
Good evening. George Penny, 159 Pine Street.
How you doing?
Directly across the street
Is your microphone on? We just want to make sure.
No, there's no green light.
Nope, that was, try it again.
I'll be loud.
That was good.
We can hear you.
Yep,
It's-
I think
it's
that's
recording.
on.
It's recording. Tap it.
Okay. Okay, I'm right across the street. I'm a sailor, so I know about the wind. And we have predominantly westerly, northwesterly, and southwesterly winds here.
So
I
this
have
is for
grown
questions.
marijuana.
This is for questions of him.
Oh, it's a
You'll
que-
get a
okay.
chance if you
I've
want to make a
grown
statement.
marijuana, and I'm very, very concerned about the odor abatement process. There will be daily monitoring of that. The other thing I know the other question I have then is, in terms of security, are you going to increase lighting in the area?
I'm not the property owner, but I don't plan on making lighting changes to the facility. There will be lighting within the facility that will be there for cameras, as well as in the event of emergency to direct employees to an exit. But in terms of
So
external,
you're just a tenant.
yeah,
Okay. Nothing's
Correct.
going to be done with the facade.
I can't speak to that, but Mr. Genova can.
Okay, fair enough.
So-
That's it. Thank you.
Just to clarify, you haven't requested anything for you to be done to the facade, for your facility?
Correct.
Okay.
Nice meeting you.
Hi, I'm Beth Calamia Shekel, 153 Pine Street. And I'm wondering about, so I've read some things about odor outside of the building, and I know you've been talking about mitigating odor inside the building, but what's it going to be like for the neighbors? What are we going to smell?
Sure. Well, you shouldn't be able to smell anything. If you are able to smell something, then there's a problem, and we're going to have a problem that we will need to then address and correct. But with the odor mitigation equipment in the facility properly destroying the VOCs, there wouldn't be any odor outside the facility.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that my second question is brought up today because I'm not clear about what the parking situation is going to be like for the building. And I have to say, ironically, when somebody came to take pictures for this presentation the other day, they blocked our driveway. And there was plenty of spots on the street, but somehow they parked right in front of our driveway. And so overall, it's a street that has parking only on one side. There aren't that many spots. I know that the owner of the CVS company is equally concerned about people ending up parking in the CVS parking lot. I'm concerned about people parking in front of my driveway. So how is the parking and that lot going to be delineated, and how many businesses are going to be in the building, and will it comply with the town's regulations about how many parking spaces are needed for a certain size business? Not yours specifically, but the whole building. And I know that tenants come and go, so sometimes you can't tell, but what is the parking situation going to be? Is that going to come up today?
So ma'am, yeah, Mr. Marshall testified that he's basically going to have 2 to 3 employees on site at most times.
No, I'm talking about for the whole building.
I understand. So as far, we have put the testimony on for this tenant, and he's going to be a very low parking use. But we will bring the owner up next, and he'll be able to talk to that a little bit more. Again, we're here for the one tenant, and I understand everybody's concerns, and we will bring the owner up. But this is not a site plan approval request, because the uses that are in the property, at least so far, are the same type of uses that were there traditionally. So they are, for lack of a better word, grandfathered this use with this size parking facility. But Mr. Marshall is aware of the neighborhood's concerns, and as he said, he's committed to sort of living in the area, and he thinks his business has done the best job it can of dealing with the parking, as far as when they do need those extra employees, they're going to be bussed in from the Reed group. So we understand.
Right, now I
the-
understand. It's not a concern about your, and I'm not opposed to your business. I think it's pretty cool, actually, if I may say that. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Beth, I have a question for you. So I understood, I live in the area too, I'm 2 blocks away. And my observation is that the former plumbing supply company worked basically from, say, 7 to 4. They did not work at night. They kind of, is that true? You live across the street?
I would say yes. I mean, I don't typically work from home, so
Yeah.
I didn't notice them, but
Okay, so there is an intensified use of this
there is,
property.
and
Yeah.
my understanding is that there are going to be multiple tenants
Yes.
now, whereas the plumbing supply
Right.
company did not
Right.
really have a retail aspect,
No.
and I'm not sure what the plans are for the rest
Right.
of the
No,
building.
of course, but my point is, and I just wanted you to confirm it,
Yes.
that the plumbing supply company worked from, say, 7 to 4. They were not there at night. They were not there doing much during the day. They sent their trucks out, and they came back at 4, and then they were done. So whatever goes on at this property will be an intensified use. So
That's right.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm a little skeptical, may I add, because I've had to report things as a neighbor several times already to the police and to the town offices here because they were starting building, clearing out without their permits. They've been violating the noise ordinance, so I'm a bit skeptical. So I would really like to hear from the developer and hear what this actual plan is, because they haven't been terrific neighbors so far. Thank you.
We will definitely bring them up.
Mr. Marshall, how are you? Good. How you doing, Mr. I want to thank Mr. Marshall. He did reach out to neighbors. My name is Bob Silver. My business is at 105 Grove Street. And I just have one question for Andrew. I don't think it was discussed about waste management. Certainly there'll be stems, there'll be certain byproducts from your harvesting. I don't think that was addressed in your testimony. Where will the soil go? Where will the roots go? Where will the plants go that are byproducts? And where will trash be stored? Will it be on-site? Will it be on the site? So I'd like to understand that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Silver. We will be generating cannabis waste. The plants, their branches, the byproducts, as you mentioned, they will all be stored in bins in the cannabis storage room. And then I'd say about once a month we'll have a triumvirate waste management service. They'll be coming in. They're a cannabis waste disposal vendor. They'll be coming in to remove the cannabis waste from us, and that'll be stored internally, like I said, in the cannabis storage facility, which is locked up only to certain authorized employees.
So your business won't require a dumpster on site?
Correct, no dumpster for me.
And the last question I have for you, Andrew, is what about the wastewater? How will wastewater be treated, and where will that be disposed of?
Wastewater, there's really not wastewater, but it will be going back into the municipal system, drained like any other water.
And that's a permitted use for our wastewater treatment?
Is there anything that'll be in the water when it leaves the facility that could be of concern?
No.
It's an organic farming type of situation.
Correct. It's essentially runoff water.
It's not like bong water or anything?
Correct.
Okay.
It is in by nature called runoff, and runoff is very important to cultivators to determine how much their plants are absorbing. So the water will run off and go back into the municipal system.
Thank you, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Is the disposal of the cannabis waste, is that part of your licensing requirement as to how you get rid of it?
Yeah, correct. It is. Well, I wouldn't say it's a licensing requirement, but yes, it's one of the permitted uses as a cultivator is getting rid of the waste.
Right, but the state doesn't regulate how you get rid of it?
It just needs to be disposed of. It can't be used further. It needs to be locked away, and it's tracked. Every amount that is thrown out is tracked to the state and the town.
Okay.
William Shekel, also 153 Pine Street. To your question, I used to work from home, and I can say that we were very lucky with the boiler supply company that they were extremely respectful with the level of noise, both coming and going. Most of those trucks were out around 7 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't hear them. I mean, that says a lot for them. sounds like you're trying to be very sensitive to this. So to your point about increased use, yeah, and again, we were lucky with heavy industrial use that they were very, very quiet. My question is about the specifics of your carbon filters, because you need to do basically zero research into marijuana farms in order to come up with words like sulfur, sewage, dead skunks, and so on. And it sounds like you are, at least on paper, doing everything you can, but as a small business, you have to cut corners somewhere. And really good carbon filters that use, say, coconut instead of bituminous charcoal are far more expensive. What are you using in your air purification systems that is allowing nothing to come out into the neighborhood? I mean, we are right across the street, so we'll smell it all.
For sure. So in addition to the carbon filters, and this is in the odor mitigation plan that was submitted along with this application.
Yeah, I saw the pictures and
Yes,
read it.
so this is the piece that's going to be on the walls, and this equipment alone can completely get rid of the VOCs in those rooms. And then in addition to those, we are installing the air scrubbers and the carbon filters. So the carbon filters are really a backup to the reactive oxygen species systems. So we are definitely not cutting corners on the carbon filters. It's a very expensive system that will be installed in every room, like I mentioned. And an odor abatement company did an assessment using this technology, actually on a bigger cultivation facility. They compared the VOCs with time from when odor mitigation this equipment was turned on, and the VOCs completely dropped to zero after the odor mitigation equipment was turned on. So I'm confident that we're going to be able to retain and eliminate the odor inside the facility, but in Montclair's ordinance, the property will be assessed annually, and I will be responsible for the payment of that annual odor assessment. And then there are standard operating procedures in place for when a complaint is filed that will all be addressed, and those are all in place.
Okay. And you mentioned your phone number is going to be on the door, so if it really stinks, we can give you a call.
Correct. But again, if it really stinks, there's a really big problem that I have, so I do not anticipate that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Marshall, you were just referring to a page is that
yes, it's the odor plan.
In B, is that
Third page
section
and-
B?
Yeah, it should be B. Should be B.
And it's
The third page in B.
it's the second page of B where those boxes are located.
It's the third page of B, the reactive oxygen species from air rows. The purifier utilizes electricity and creates ROS.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Marshall.
How you doing, Mr. Scott?
I think you indicated that you
Mr.
would
Scott,
be...
please identify yourself for the record.
Excuse me. William Scott, co-chair of the Montclair Housing Commission, and also the chair of the Montclair NAACP committee, and also a resident of Montclair for 73 years, and I live at 23 Cedar Avenue. You indicated, Mr. Marshall, that you would be making a contribution annually to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund of $15,000. For what period of time is that going to be?
Every year that we're in operation, and currently we plan to be in Montclair for at least 10 years, because that's what we have set in our LOI with the property owner.
Okay.
So at least for the next 10 years, and that amount plans to increase as our revenue increase as well.
Well, you just answered the second question I was going to pose.
Oh, man.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Scott.
Mr. Scott? Is this the first time that the Housing Commission has endorsed a business?
Absolutely. Well, this is the first time the Housing Commission has received a direct contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from a business, yes. This is the first time that has occurred. And I did sit in on, I'll even back up a little bit further. I attended a governor's conference in 2022, and this was a major topic of additional revenue, not only coming directly to municipalities, but the opportunity for these entrepreneurs and new businesses to make direct contributions to nonprofit organizations within the municipality. And I was very, very surprised when I came back. I met Mr. Marshall at a council meeting, and he was identifying his application, and he absolutely stepped up immediately and said that he wanted to make that contribution, in addition to other organizations within the township, but as a first, to make a direct contribution to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in Montclair. That is a major. It's a beginning amount. I hope other organizations follow suit and do the same thing that this business, Mr. Marshall, is going to have, will do. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Scott. Any other questions from the public?
Yes. Can you bring up your map again, please?
The floor plan?
Yeah.
Here.
Let me see if I can.
I think you might want to point to it just to.
Sure. Please identify yourself for the record.
Sure.
And come over to the mic, yes.
Am I on?
Yeah.
My name is Maxine Bergner. I live at 148 Pine Street in Montclair, which is on the side of the parking lot adjacent to the building. Where on this map?
You have to, ma'am, you have to you stay by the microphone
Or
so
you
we can pick you up.
carry that with you.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
portable.
Well, I can talk. Where on your map do you intake deliveries and outtake the bins that you have stored vegetation in? How would you take trash out and how would you take product in?
When you're referring to
It's not lit. Let me.
When you refer to product coming in, are you referring to cannabis product?
It could be your raw materials, it could be packaging materials, it could be office supplies, it could be
Sure.
anything.
Well, how I know the building functions from a delivery standpoint, if there's cars in the lot, the trucks would pull up on the curb cut, and then from there we would bring in the agriculture or the office supplies into the facility through here, and then into my facility.
So the entrance to your side of the building is from a doorway on the parking lot, and that's where your suppliers of plants, your packaging materials would be delivered. How would your waste get out of the building? Like the bins you mentioned that you're going to store decayed vegetation, how do they get out of the building? Because there is no doors on that right side or in the back corner there.
Right, so as I mentioned, cannabis waste will be stored here. The bins that I mentioned would be stacked up in this room. The truck would come in. This would be a before hours or after hours pickup from Triumvirate. They would come into the lot. We would bring out the waste, put it in the truck, and that would be it.
So basically, deliveries and in and out would be through that door that the employees enter and the vendors would enter, anybody else would be.
Correct, through the common corridor of the building.
Okay, and out into your parking lot.
Correct.
Okay. A second question is, you mentioned that your staffing would be coming from Reed, and you would have 2 to 6 of those at any time.
2 to 6 employees, 2 to 6 genuine grow employees of any time, and that 2 to 6 number includes anywhere from maybe 2 to 4 members of the READ program who have autism.
Okay, so you would have on-premise experienced growers, training other people, supervising electronic equipment, as well as less experienced people from READ, maybe doing plant maintenance and other types of activities.
Correct. The individuals from READ would be helping us with the cleaning, the trimming, the packaging of the bud, and then you're correct. We would have per se a marijuana expert. We'll have my head grower, probably head of operations. They'll be there every day, tending to the plants, the equipment, the water, the nutrients, and then yes, the READ employees are working.
So it's a 6-person head count maximum of more experienced and less experienced people working in kind of a sheltered workshop environment, or?
Yeah, a mix of experienced and then inexperienced individuals who have autism but are high functioning enough to work in this environment.
Okay, I think I've asked most of my questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Marshall, if you could just remind us how often you think you're going to have deliveries and coming in and out of there. I think you had said about twice a month for those agricultural deliveries.
Yeah, probably twice a month for the agricultural supplies, but like I said, I also plan to do that local shopping at hydroponic and agricultural and horticultural stores because it's such a small business. As I mentioned, there won't be pallets coming in of soil or nutrients or any of that nature. Probably be able to be a box truck coming in, dropping off a couple bags of soil, a couple cartons of nutrients. That's pretty much it. And then, as I mentioned, once a month, the waste management company will come in and pick up the cannabis waste.
And as far as when product is finished and ready to go to a wholesaler or a retailer, you'll be transporting that yourself or someone from your business in your vans, is that correct?
Correct. So we have a company vehicle. I can talk about that, or we will have a company vehicle. There's no local regulations governing it, but there are state regulations. So essentially, you need to have liability insurance over $1 million. Per our security plan, we'll have 2 employees with the vehicle at all times. You need to have a lockbox for the cannabis inside and temperature control for the cannabis as well. So we are able to bring our cannabis after it's done to go to a lab to be tested, then brought back to us and on to retailers or other manufacturers.
And you'll handle that yourself in your own van, a normal sort of family size, regular size van?
Yeah, it would be like a white standard Ford cargo van, no markings on it, just the business name and address.
So that would cut down on the need for outside vendors and larger trucks to have to come to the property, correct?
Correct. The only time outside vendors would be coming is FedEx, UPS, USPS, and then, like I said, maybe at max twice a month agricultural supplies and once a month waste.
Maybe Amazon every now and then.
I don't know if Amazon supplies growers.
Well, I'm sure you guys are going to need like office supplies.
Yes.
And,
so
you know,
I would
general
include Amazon and the
sundries,
UPS and FedEx.
You know.
A question about the folks from Reed. Are you going to be paying them directly, or are they going to be paid essentially as kind of a temp agency would, where you pay Reed and then Reed pays them?
No, they'll be an employee of Genuine Grow getting salary and wages, and they'll go through the CRC vetting process and get fingerprinted and get a cannabis business identification badge, which is standard for all employees.
And they'll be making the statement of wage of $14.13 an hour?
Correct. They'll be making more than that.
Thank you.
So when you call them inexperienced, that's only to start. Eventually, they will be full employees and they will.
Yes. I'd also like to maybe note, Reed currently has a program in Hackensack called Greens Do Good, where these individuals are currently growing lettuce and other vegetables for sale to local vendors in a vertical hydroponic farm. And so the goal is to transition those employees to the cultivation.
How often is your anticipated harvest time? You know.
So we're looking at, with the 2 grow rooms that you see, they'll be staggered. So each room should have about 5 harvests per year, so that's 10 total harvests.
And roughly once a month, maybe, or?
I'd say harvest, every 36 days. It's about anywhere, depending on the strain, from 55 to high-end 70 days of flower mature time. But like I said, the plants originally start in veg where they're babies, and then they grow, and as they're bigger, then we transfer the pots from the veg pots into the flower pots. And the flower stage is where you count the days. That's the 60-day clock is the flowering time.
And the harvesting takes, what, a day or 2?
Harvest is a full day activity of chopping down the plants and hanging them up to dry and weighing every single plant as it's chopped down. That's also a big process with the CRC, is everything has to be weighed, wet weight, the dry weight of the plant after it's trimmed, before it's trimmed. So once the plants are harvested, they hang up to dry for anywhere from really 1 to 2 weeks, and then they cure for about another week or 2 after that. And then we're able to trim them and package them, and they're ready to go after being tested.
I didn't get the name of this organization that is supplying these folks to you.
So, REED, Reed Autism Services.
And where are they located?
Oakland, New Jersey.
And will your people be coming in from Oakland?
Well, that's just where the program is based. These individuals will be local individuals that Reed will be reaching out to and working with. So, and that's part of the Genuine Grow commitment, is hiring local. I aim to have 100% Montclair workforce. In our application to Montclair, we committed at least 50% of the workforce to Montclair residents, but I would aim to have it be at least 100%.
But are you being responsible for bringing these folks who live locally into your facility, or is Reed going to be delivering them up to you?
Yeah, Reed would be driving them and transporting them together.
So every day, they are going to be...
Well, not
doing
every
that?
day, but as they would be scheduled. They would be they're part-time employees.
I see.
Full-time equivalents, though.
Good evening. My name is Mark Matthias. I live at 152 Pine Street, exactly adjacent of 154 Pine Street. So essentially, I'm on the south side of the building with our windows basically facing into the other parking lot of the unit. I guess my question is a little bit of a more general one. So one of the biggest things that I think I and probably my neighbors as well are concerned about is noise into the property. So we are in a historic area. Our building itself is an older building in which noise mitigation is not the best, so we do hear a lot of what happens on the outside. I'm a little bit weary of the mechanical plan on its own. I'm a mechanical trade as well. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, and I think what I'm a little bit weary about, and what my question is if there will be like a submission of a mechanical plan in general for the space. The reason that I say is that I believe on the application, it did mention that condensing units are going to have to be put outside. Where they would go, I guess, is gonna be one of the questions. And then just with the fact that everything is gonna have to be controlled humidity to an extreme event, and also every single space is going to have to hold its own certain temperature. You're most likely going to have multiple condensing units that are multiple stages that are going to be placed outside that will be cycling constantly. And then on top of that, one of the questions was in regards to the mechanical plan, typically when you have an air scrubber unit, you do have air that is being recycled, and as humans are working in space or even plants are growing, they emit carbon dioxide. And typically, at least in my practice, I've seen that 90% of the time you have to have a makeup air unit that does pull outside air to help recycle into the other space. And in order to feed humans, plants, a hospital, whatever is being built, typically an air change in the room is something that we measure that has to happen every minute to every hour, and that's standardized number. And I guess I was going to see if there was going to be a plan that was going to be put forth if, I guess, prior to approval of conditional use.
Well, not prior of conditional use, but after, we still have to get approval from the township council for the license and finalize our build-out plans, but I presume that would be part of a plan that gets submitted to the building department as part of that. And you mentioned the condenser on the ground. I believe that was before it came to terms that it would be on the roof. But yes, you are correct in terms of the humidity control and the CO2. There will be CO2 monitoring systems. And again, as I mentioned earlier, everything will be designed to be safe for the employees and the plants and the air environment. And in terms of noise, I don't anticipate you hearing any of the internal machines from the facility.
Okay, because that definitely is, I guess, a big concern. And then I guess the last question that I had was just on the other lights. I think in your Exhibit C, in regards to the security, there was a mention that there was going to be added lights onto the other facade so you can properly illuminate the building and have beams over doors, for example. I know it didn't go into detail probably due to like the security of the other matter. But I guess just another one of the concerns is just ensuring that that light is not really going to be illuminated past the building, or I guess to like the adjacent buildings or people across the street. So like our building, for example, is a bit of a higher dwelling and our bedrooms are on that floor. And a lot of the light, even from the street, essentially emits directly from that. And I wanted to see if you had any more insight on that.
For sure, I definitely would not want to be impacting your life with your light. That's one of my personal pet peeves at night. The beams of light you mentioned, I believe, are only in event of the emergency. And so those beams of light would be illuminated to direct employees to a meetup spot or areas of egress, exit, etc. So I would not anticipate the light for you to see the light or for any bright light like that.
If I might, Mr. Marshall, you have not asked the building owner to add any more lights to the outside for your business, have you? To the outside of the building?
Correct.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, Counselor, do we need a break?
No.
Good? Okay. Well, let's proceed to your next witness.
Go ahead, we'll get David. Get you sworn in?
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
David Genova, Managing Partner, Greenwood Development, Montclair, New Jersey. I am one of the owners of 154 Pine Street.
There were certain questions about the property in general. I know the board is curious about, maybe start with you, when you purchased the property,
Sure.
what you've been doing there, and then if you can definitely touch on the other tenants and whether you have tenants and what the
Sure.
plans are.
I purchased the building in 2021, been working on the project since about 2020. The pandemic certainly interrupted our initial plans for the building, and leasing velocity was pretty low. There were not a lot of retailers, there were not a lot of office tenants, there were not a lot of commercial tenants looking in the market between when we got under contract for the building and maybe 6 or so months after owning the building. In a vacuum, I made the decision to renovate the building in the attempt of attracting tenants. So without any tenancies, I put in a plan to the building department for exterior improvements to the building, interior ADA modifications to create accessible bathrooms, common core work to separate tenant spaces in a proper way, essentially to speed up and attract future tenancies. Backing up a little bit before that, there were typically, people have mentioned the plumbing supply business that was there. That was the most forward-facing business because it was on the street, but there were actually 2 other uses in the building right immediately prior to my purchase. One was a cheese processing and manufacturing business that the family who owned the building had a generational stake in. And second, there was actually a plumbing contractor separate from the plumbing wholesale supply business. So there were 3 different tenants in there, and then there was a vacant space. The vacant space was not properly demised. It's hard to say that there were ever really 4 tenants in the building, but there was a whole stretch that had been kind of DIY cut off from the rest of the building that was vacant space. In our building permit submission, we didn't propose any changes to use. We didn't propose any expansion of the building in any way. In fact, we demoed a mezzanine that wasn't built to code that added about 600 square feet of office space within the structure. We demoed that as part of our demolition permit. I do apologize to the resident here. We did have a hiccup in our permitting in the beginning of this where we applied for permits. They were issued. We never picked them up and paid for them and started demolition. We rectified that within a few days of the building department, so I apologize for that hiccup. But we essentially put back what was there, but to code. We put in new bathrooms. There is a new HVAC plan. That HVAC plan calls for condensers to be stored on a flat section of the shed roof that is adjacent to the barrel roof for future HVAC condensing units that may come into the building. We have a plan to restore the steel windows that surround the building. There's a plan to replace garage doors in like kind with glass garage doors or more attractive garage doors There's a plan to replace all the stores and all the doors and storefronts. I don't mean that retail storefronts, I mean the physical construction of the glass. Kind of similar to what you've seen at the inspection station on Label Street. And those permits were issued back in October. So we are in the middle of that work. And in that period of time is when Andrew and I met at Genuine Grow. That is our first tenant that kind of requires a conditional use application to this board. So that's the 30,000-foot view of why we're here. But I think I can probably answer some questions that are specific to that.
So do you have other tenants signed up now?
There is a second cannabis tenant that will be coming in front of this board as well, a manufacturing tenant, which is different than a grow cultivation tenant. It's essentially a processing use where they take the raw product and turn it into finished product. That is also a micro operation, so that has certain stipulations from the state government and the CRC in terms of how many employees they can have, how much space they can take, et cetera. And then there is a tenant on the front side that is a wholesale supply business, very similar to the plumbing supply business, that is taking the front part of the building, and then we have a vacancy. So there is still one tenant that we have not signed a lease with.
So there's no retail so far?
So far, there is no retail, and I don't see how retail could.
Yeah.
I can't imagine coming in front of this board and asking for retail, but there's no retail planned here. There are ancillary offices for the uses that are in there, but there is not a specific office tenant. Correct. And the office space that has been absorbed by the tenant so far is less than the office space that was ancillary to the 3 previous uses that were in there.
office uses, they're
Commercial uses that have offices, correct.
So Janice and Art, based on what you're hearing so far, this has got to come to us for some sort of site plan review, does it? With
There's no, according to our definition of site plan trigger, if there's the change in use does not change, it does not intensify in terms of parking, we define it based on parking, then it doesn't trigger a site plan application.
What about the generator?
The generator would, if it's placed.
What about the air conditioning components and stuff like that?
They're on the roof.
Right, they're on the roof that's closest to the residential side.
No, they're in the.
You said the shed roof.
The shed roof is adjacent to the parking lot, which separates that, so they are far into the site. They're not
from the. I wouldn't characterize that as far into the site.
It's like
that
30,
parking lot
it's
is
like 30 feet.
Well, I haven't been out there to take any
Sure.
measurements, but that shed roof is 1 story, right?
The building has an
The shed
additional-
roof is 1 story, right?
The shed roof is 1 story, correct.
So you're talking about putting condensers on top of that 1-story building that has residential units that are going to basically overlook that. They are higher, they are raised up on the units on the other side of the parking lot, have levels that are raised up, so they're going to be able to look on top of that roof. They can see on top of that roof now.
Right, they can see the mechanical
Right.
equipment on top of
And
that.
we don't know how many units are going on top of that roof. We don't even know how many units are going on top of the roof for this applicant. Now, you're talking about bringing another manufacturing applicant that's going to need similar air handling. So we don't know how many units that's going to require. And then you've got 2 other tenants that we have no clue about. So what are we supposed to do with that?
Do a site plan review.
Those permits.
On-site,
No,
but
what the memo that I read said that it's up to our judgment. I've got a judgment. I don't know about you.
yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to, I
Those
think that.
permits have been issued, and those air conditioning condensers are scheduled
Yeah,
to be
but you're-
installed in 3 weeks.
Well, I don't really care about that.
No, I hear you, but we have
that's
those
that's
permits
very
in
nice,
hand-
but
in hand
what I
for
do
that.
care about is what's going to happen overall when everything gets put on there, and you've got 2 unknowns coming in there, and we don't know exactly what's happening here.
But we
We
wouldn't-
can't, and it's very hard to approve things in isolation where you're doing this in very piecemeal fashion. And I'm not faulting you for doing it in a piecemeal fashion
understand.
with the way that you're bringing in tenants, but the way that the applications are coming before us is disadvantaging us.
The plan was to create an area on that shed roof that we can accommodate as many condensers as we need for the
But we
building.
don't, but again, I don't know how many condensers that is.
Neither
And
do
I
we.
don't know what kind of noise that's gonna require. And, quite frankly, I don't trust you to adequately, fence it off. You seem to think that it's a great deal, by your statement here, you seem to think that it's a great deal of distance away from the neighbors. So I really can't trust you to make sure that even what you put up there is adequately shielded in terms of sound and sight.
The building department already weighed in on that and
But
asked
the
us to
building
screen
department
it.
doesn't have all the information either. That's the problem. We're getting this piecemeal. And the building department only can weigh in on what it has in front of it. Does the building department know about the other tenants that are coming in? No, because you don't know about the other two tenants that are coming in. You only know about these two, but do you have any idea how many condensers and how many air conditioning and whatever else, units, generators, or air exchange systems or what, need to go on that flat roof for the two tenants that you have now? Do you know? Yes or no?
For the tenants.
For the tenants that you have now? Do you know what has to go on that flat roof?
We only have one tenant, and we have
Okay,
two.
don't,
No, I'm
don't,
answering the question,
don't, no,
Chairman.
you're nitpicking.
Chairman, I'm
You-
answering the
You've told me that you have another tenant lined up, all right? So I'm taking that, I'm gonna take you at your face value that
Please.
you've got two tenants there, okay?
They are.
Do you know how, okay, let's take the first. Do you know how many air conditioning units and whatever else are going for the tenant that you have signed up now? The applicant here, now?
That's, I think.
Do you
we're-
know? Yes or no?
I am trying to answer the question.
That's a
Chairman.
yes or no, that's a yes or no
We're
question.
talking about two different things.
No, we're not.
If I
No, we're
can't
not.
answer-
I asked you, do
Chairman,
you
No,
know
I can't
how
answer the question.
many?
He's not letting me answer the question. I can't answer the question.
You are
We
not
have-
answering my question because you're not listening to my question. Do you know, yes or no, how many units are going to be needed on that flat roof, and whether any other equipment is going to be needed on that flat roof for the tenant who's the applicant here tonight?
I do not know for the tenant that's the applicant here.
That's
tonight.
all I was asking,
But
that's all
if-
I was asking you for. That was my question. Anything that you add on to that, sir, is ancillary, is in addition, okay? That's not what I asked you is whether or not you knew or not. You're telling me that you don't know. So if you don't know how many units are going to be for this applicant, how could you know how many units there would be for the other three tenants? Impossible, right?
One tenant is signed up in a lease and has approved building drawings where condensers are outlined. So I know that tenant. This tenant and the other cannabis tenant are in an LOI phase because the lease can't be consummated until the municipality and the state issues their licenses.
Understood.
When they do, we will develop a building plan, a very expensive set of construction documents that will inform whether or not those things can be accomplished in the same area. And if they can, then we will apply to the building department with that as a stipulation, engineered, fully drawn, and fully diagnosed there. And if they can't, I'm in total agreement with you, and I imagine the board, that if they have to be ground mounted, if they are anywhere other than where we've designed them to be, or if they are bigger and higher capacity, then we would need to either come to this board for relief, or we'd need to file a site plan. Same thing with the generator. I don't know how big it's gonna be because he's not there yet.
He doesn't know yet.
Right. So as soon as we do,
What you've told me is not what I asked you, it's what we already knew. All right? So that's fine. That's fine. But that's not what I was asking you. So let's take it back a notch. Counselor, you wanted to say something?
I wanted him to, if he didn't know the answer, to let you know he didn't know the answer.
You should have been more assertive. All right.
But I gotta ask one of my stupid newbie questions again. So if I'm hearing things right, we have a building that the use in and of itself is not different from its current use, and so that would not trigger a site plan.
Right.
Then there's one step beyond that, which is that there is an unknown quantity of equipment that's going on the roof, where the building department has approved a certain amount of equipment that's going in there now, but we don't know how much more is going to need to be there. And that in and of itself doesn't trigger a site plan review. But then there is the other, I would say, significant possibility, if not probability, that there will need to be a generator, but we don't know, that's not in the plans now. It's hypothetical for this tenant or for other tenants. So the question is, at what point does this become sufficiently pregnant that we know that it needs to become a site plan review? Because so I'll stop. Yeah, that's the question.
When there's ground-mounted equipment that is required for this site, that triggers site plan. If the applicant decides to stripe the parking, that triggers site plan. The striping or restriping of parking lots triggers site plan approval. The installation of any exterior trash enclosures triggers site plan approval.
And what if we say that, based on the testimony that we've heard, we require the applicant to do a little bit more diligence on, for example, whether there needs to be a generator, and we're not prepared to grant the permit until they provide that information, which may or may not trigger site plan review? Is that within our purview?
I actually don't think so. I think it's pretty straightforward. The conditional use permit, do they meet what the board is being asked is, do they meet the requirements, the conditions for the conditional use permit? And that's pretty straightforward in our ordinance. At some point, when they come in with their detailed plans, there may be a trigger for site plan, and at that point, they'll come back before you.
Thank you, and I do agree, and that's why I tried to make the point in the very beginning. We are just asking for the conditional use approval. That's what Mr. Marshall needs to get to the next step, to take, he needs the council to approve the permit, the license, which we're hoping will happen soon, and then he has a conditional approval from the state, but that needs this board's approval as to the conditional use. And as you said, we're not fully there yet, because that takes a lot of money and effort to get to the next level of detail. And there will be an internal fit out, and that will have to go to the building department, and it will have to be approved when that's done.
And so, at the risk of sounding like a broken record,
Right.
this is what makes me want
Just
to quietly protest the way in which this is set up for our non-deliberation of nothing.
Let me just ask, though, that there's a timing issue for our applicant, correct?
Yes.
So his conditional license expires in, is it May, that you said?
Right, we're
So
supposed
if
to
he
get back.
doesn't get through the planning board for an agreement on his conditional use application, then he goes before the, well, my question is, what happens if
Yeah.
you don't,
Let Sean,
can you extend your,
me bring
your
up-
conditional use?
I'm going to bring up Sean Mack. He's an attorney from our firm, and he's handling those applications, so let me.
Yes,
Wait,
these.
Can you spell your last name? I just,
M-A-C-K?
okay.
Mr. Mack, you're an attorney at law in the state of New Jersey?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, the way it's set up, is the conditional use approval, the state has already recognized how long it's taking at the local level to get through for everybody. So the state has been extending it already on their own. He's set to expire in May. Right now, people are coming up in March who got approvals before he did, and they're now making specific requests to the state for further extensions. And the indications we're getting are the state's probably going to extend people because these processes at a local level take a long time to go through, and the state recognizes that.
Yeah, because, we want to support local business, and we don't want to do anything, I think here, I can speak for my colleagues, that would hinder his ability to move forward, but, I don't.
Yeah. And the state also recognizes, as they're going through this, you then begin to have carrying costs, and having a local startup, small business, and as those things drag on, it gets very expensive for people.
I recognize the board's unease with the way the ordinance and the statute is, but it is what it is. We're following the rules. This is the next step that we need. And there is a trigger, where he would have to come back if we're going to put a generator outside, if there's HVAC units that have to go on the ground. I have every confidence that Ms. Talley will cite that and will require the board, this applicant specifically if it's for our business or the owner for any of the other tenants that come in to have to do that. What the applicant really just needs now is the conditional use approval. And subject to all the other permits like you would any other application, subject to having to go to the building department, subject to having to put the odor mitigation processes in the correct way, and that's all going to get reviewed. We're really now just going through the conditional use. There is one case, and I'm sorry to bring a copy of it, didn't think I'd actually get to have to say it. I believe it's Judge Pressler said in Exxon versus Livingston that basically that the conditional use needs to provide specific details in the ordinance, and if it does, and then if those conditions are met, it's a statutory approval. If you hit them, you hit them, and either you do or you don't. And I think it's fairly clear that the way it's laid out, and I appreciate that the board doesn't like the way that the conditional use, criteria works, but that's where we are, and that is what we're asking for this evening. And if you need to put some conditions on it to which I think apply anyway, whether you write them down or not, that if if we trigger something that needs site plan, then it's going to need site plan.
Sounds like a closing argument, Council.
We still have Mr. Steck, but I just, I know this is.
Sean and I were in high school when that case came out.
Yeah. Anytime Judge Presser talks, I listen.
So, are there any questions, any other questions of Mr. Genova from the board? Are there questions of the public from Mr. Genova about what he testified to this evening? Let's step forward, ma'am.
Hi, I am, again, Maxine Burkhardt, live at 148 Pine Street, across the parking lot that would be between the structure and the 3-unit condominium building that faces that parking lot. And my request is for David, could you put up a photograph that shows the roof line, the front of the building, and the parking lot next door, and then perhaps point out where on this flat roof you would probably recommend that these condensers and other mechanical units be placed. I think everyone here would like to see it.
So just so for the record and so the board understands, this was submitted with the application. This was in that in the photo packet with the floor plans. I believe this is the second photo.
I don't see a flat roof.
We're gonna put it up here so everybody can see it. One more back, Janice.
Is this it?
That's it. If you can
Let me
rotate
turn it. So sorry about that. There you go.
Okay. So the building is really two buildings. There's a barrel roof, which starts at about the chimney line, if you see there,
This
that
is
goes
it?
around to the other side of the building. And then this was an addition on the building at some point in its
Is this
history.
it?
This one, nope, sorry, up in front.
Oh,
That
here.
one-story shed, that was an addition to the building built after the fact. We have already redone the roof in its entirety, and that section now is being reframed to be flat so that we can.
Stone right now, looking at it every day, it's stone.
We haven't reframed yet, but we have the permits to reframe that section to be flat and to accommodate rooftop condensers there with screening around the side. So it is the side, it is what you see closest to you from here. That is the furthest away from any property line that we could put it.
This is it right here?
That section right there is being reframed, correct?
So that's going to hold the mechanical equipment, let's just call it.
Correct.
And that is right across from your building though, right?
Can you raise it up to show where?
Right on the street? That's the closest to the street.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah,
not-
right, I know
I'm missing, there's a lot of questions.
If you look at page 3 of your planning report,
Yeah, figure
you have
4.
a picture.
I'm going to pull that up. Give me a minute.
Yeah. Page 3?
No,
No.
this one.
Which one?
Oh, yeah, right there, figure 4.
That one.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, familiar with it, right.
I think it was right near the top.
Oh, what you said.
Dave, while they're pulling that up, there is like a parapet wall along the front line, so that's not necessarily visible from the street there, correct?
Correct.
All right, what did it do? My connection's a little slow.
Must be at my office.
I don't think this is it. That's a different one. Here it is. This is it, right here.
Oh, now you've done it.
This is the right one.
Great.
I can just go to Google Earth, right? Maybe
I have
can-
some Google Earth photos, actually, if you're looking for the overview.
Maybe that's faster. Doesn't know where we are.
So David, just a question for you. Why is that the best place for those condenser units? When it's right on the street, opposite residential units across the street?
Sure.
And next to the mill, the
The
condos?
building is built to the lot line in the rear and to
Mhm.
the north.
Oh, so there's no place in the rear?
There's no space in the rear
Yeah.
or on the north. There's about 3 feet on the north side,
Yeah.
which actually was the architect's first idea, was to kind of shove them in on the north side.
Well, that's next to
But that's
housing
right
as
next,
well,
that's
right?
right next to the house on the ground.
Mhm.
So our
Is this what you
potential
wanted to see?
locations are either on the roof
Mm.
or they are in that parking area there.
Mm.
And being in
Is
the
this what you
parking
wanted to
area,
see?
we felt that was even
A
closer
little
to
further down.
the homes next door. So the
Mhm.
roof,
Take it a little
the
further
only
down.
section we
Down
could
this
figure
way?
out how to
Yep.
frame flat enough to hold it
Now,
was in that section.
yeah, rotate it back. There you go.
Where do you intend to put, your documentation said that you were going to put in 12 to 14 striped parking spaces. Where would they be?
We are not proposing in this application to stripe parking.
You might have to press and hold.
Well, my point is that if things don't fit on the roof,
Yes.
they would have to be put on the ground, and would that cut into the number of allowable parking spaces?
If they had to be on the ground, that would necessitate a site plan approval. That would be something where we'd have to re-engineer the parking lot entirely to accomplish them. But let me just point here so you can see. This section of the roof is being reframed to be flat. I can't give you the exact height, but it's right about there, so that mechanical equipment is going to be blocked by the parapet wall on the front, and then screening put next to that that flat roof to block it from the south. So it'll be on this sloped section will become flat in the next few weeks. You'll see that happen.
Because right now, the roof line is continuing to be in a dome shape, so.
It's really 2 roofs, but yes, it continues. Right today, it looks somewhat similar to this, but with a new
So you're
membrane.
gonna modify the roof line to make it flat in
Correct.
that section and the front facing the parking lot.
This section,
How
correct.
deep into the building will the flat section be? Will it go?
I don't remember the exact footage off the top of my head, but it was enough to accommodate what we thought would be the potential mechanical uses in the building for any outside appurtenances. It was intended to accommodate enough for typical uses in the building, understanding that, this particular applicant may have additional needs. We will have to look at how we appropriate that roof section, but it was meant to hold as many condensers as we could need in this building for the various uses we were proposing. It is a deceivingly long run
It's
here.
about 100 feet from the front little white windows all the way to the back corner of that fence line.
Right, I think this is about 45 just of here, just on this side.
The whole, I only know the depth
Right.
of the lot, it's 100 feet. So anywhere along that roof line, facing those parking spaces, facing those residential condominiums, could be a condenser.
On this roof, correct.
Yes. So it could be anywhere along the 100 feet up and back.
Not anywhere along the whole building, because this stops about halfway down the parking lot. This section of the building stops, and then it juts in, and it Ls, and so it's before the stop.
And there's a bay window a bay door at the far end.
There
and
is
the
this
two
little
front ends
sliver
you
of
don't
green.
see off the end.
That's right. Sure.
Any other questions?
So Janice,
For this witness.
I'm still just stuck on one factual thing. So imagine for a minute, we grant the conditional use permit to this applicant. And then X weeks from now, come to find out they need a generator, and then they come back, and I guess it would be Mr. Genova, because it's his building, comes back and says, we need a site plan review for the building. And we say no, hypothetically, because for whatever reason, we don't approve it. And then all of a sudden, the business can't do that which it said it was going to do to yield the conditional use permit. So what happens then?
Then they don't get site plan approval. They could come back with a different site plan. If you didn't like the location of the generator where they propose it, they'll have to come up with a different location.
But in the meantime, we did a conditional use permit for a business that,
Because the generator is not part of the conditional use permit.
But they can't proceed with the business because
Right.
the building can't be.
okay, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And clearly, the applicant would take your lead on where you'd prefer it. Mr. Genova, we did not mention before, because I thought it was for you, we did discuss whether or not, because we don't think it triggers site plan, replacing portions of that chain link fence with a solid fence, which I do think is preferred under the code. Was that something that's we're willing to do?
Yeah, we have no issues with that.
So at least the one thing we can do without triggering site plan,
Correct.
we've agreed to do.
If I could just answer Mr. Jacobson one point here, and I don't want to speak for the applicant, but I think there might have been a misunderstanding here, so you correct me if I'm wrong too. The proposed power backup is for the security system. It's a requirement for the security system to not go under. I don't believe the intent is to back up all the grow lights. So a battery backup for security camera system is something we can easily accomplish within our internal power. We could do it with a Tesla battery, we could do it with some of the competitors that have things on that. That's a very low voltage problem that we're trying to solve, low amperage problem that we're trying to solve. I did not understand Mr. Marshall's testimony to suggest that we are talking about a generator to keep the entire operation.
Well, that was my question to him. Like, what happens if,
But it's a security, I mean.
I know you talked about security, but you need, if you had another Hurricane Sandy where that area was out for like 7 days, what happens to your stuff?
If we had a Hurricane Sandy, we would lose all the crops.
You would lose them all
and we
because you
would
don't
lose the
have a
harvest and the money.
generator. Yeah,
But
okay.
the backup system, as Mr. Genova is saying, is just for the security system.
So I think with that in mind, I don't want to, I'll commit that from a building standpoint, we have no intentions of putting in a generator. We have no intentions of putting in any enhanced mechanical equipment other than what's, permitted and what it needs to do for these tenants. And it sounds to me like neither does Mr. Marshall. So I just want to alleviate that concern that there's some imminent generator coming. I don't believe that to be the case.
I mean, just because we've done a few of these cases, I do know that other places that are putting in battery backups, and my understanding is that has been acceptable. There are ways to do that because it is just a security system. But I'm not an expert, and I'm not going to tell you that for certain, but I've heard it testified to before.
If I could also just tie up one thing that Ms. Loftman brought up in the beginning too, that I noted to myself I would tie up, which is the windows. The windows on this building are gorgeous. They're some of the things that we're most excited about renovating with this building. And the northern facade, which Mr. Marshall abuts on, is getting a nice treatment to that building to make it more attractive than it is now, including the restoration of those steel windows and reglazing of those steel windows. He has a security protocol that prohibits him from having that glass be the ultimate divisor between the outside and the inside. So we planned to, where it was appropriate for him, tint that window so that you don't see in, and then frame directly in front of it with a solid surface wall. The reason I don't want to block in the windows is that they are monstrously expensive to buy again. And if there is a future tendency that wants them, we wanted to preserve the openings. But the plan is not just to have glass between the outside and the inside. It's actually to frame inside in front of it, but that would be an ugly visual. So then to tint the windows so what you see appears to be.
Thank you for clearing that
Sure.
up, because it was a security thing. It's a hidden spot in the back, just break the window, you know, and steal stuff. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Zini Fox, 167 Pine Street. And I had two concerns when I came, but one of them was really taken care of. It had to do with security, and that was
Turn on the
Could you just hit the button on that microphone?
Sorry about that.
The,
button.
Yeah, that should be good.
that's right.
Yes?
Tap the microphone. It's now, press it again. Now tap it. Now it's working.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You think I'd know all the times I've used these things. But my concerns about the security were really well taken care of. Just knowing that young people break into things, and now I don't have that worry. But secondly, and I loved your comment about the windows. Originally, when people were there, I had spoken to some demolition people, and I said, you'll be keeping the windows, and they said it was impossible. So, no, that's wonderful. I suspect that it would fit under a classic industrial design category that would be worthwhile. But my concern, there was a major flood on Pine Street a few years ago, and I figured out why. The water flows down from the upper area, and at the top of Pine Street, then the road tilts up. And so all the water that was coming down went down the street. It literally was a river. It was really scary. And I think my neighbors had their entire downstairs destroyed by the water. And it's the water that had me concerned, and whether you're aware of it. And I was picturing cannabis floating all over the place and floating out the doors. But I really just wanted to make the point that
Right.
that has to be attended to. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah, we're not proposing to enhance the building in any way to try to exacerbate that, but we are hoping to alleviate some of that through internal drains and things like that that tie into the system in a way that
Okay.
weren't there before.
Also, the town is looking at that. I was very happy to see the commentary about runoff waters being addressed. So, but that is very encouraging too. I'm really glad I came tonight.
One question for the landlord.
Give your name again.
Press it again?
No, give your name, give your name again.
George Penny, 159
Thank you.
Pine Street. Thank you. Are you going to do anything with the facade? Or are you going to leave it nondescript and ugly so no one goes there?
Somewhere in between. We don't have a signage plan, so there's no big signs or anything being installed. The openings, I call them the openings, so there's that one that's got cedar shake shingles, then there's a couple of garage doors, and then there's a wood framed section. They're all within semi-equal bays. Those are getting a combination of new doors and new glass to see into the building. All the columns, the masonry columns, are being reparged and repainted, so they're being restored. The brick is actually in great shape. It's kind of a strange brick, but it's in great shape, so there's a little bit of pointing being done to it. And then there's some architectural, not site, but architectural lighting to kind of illuminate the building, like gooseneck fixtures that will illuminate the front of the building but don't project outwards.
Okay,
That's the
That's
facade.
my second question.
Yeah.
Every month or so, you're going to have $10,000 or $20,000 worth of product moving in and out of that building. You want that lit up.
Well, it's not going to move out the facade. It's not going to move out the front.
Okay, all right.
It moves out the parking lot, and there are some existing site lights in that parking lot, and there will be surface-mounted wall sconces on that parking lot to illuminate the building, but not project out far into the parking lot.
Thank you.
Sure.
maybe I'd follow with Andrew. Andrew, would you expect that those, when you are doing shipments, that this would be at the nighttime or probably during daylight hours?
When we're transporting cannabis to and from laboratories and other retailers, I'd expect it to be normal business hours because that's when those businesses are operating. I wouldn't expect to move $100,000 worth of cannabis in the middle of the night like that. It would, you know, it's a small business. It's small batch, high quality cannabis, and the small batch is really true in that every harvest is maybe generating, I hope, 150 to 200 pounds of cannabis, and that is true small batch that will be then sold to local retailers. But to answer your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, Council,
Thank you. Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot to ask a question.
All good.
You mentioned that you have a signed lease for a second cannabis-based business who is a manufacturer.
We have a signed letter of intent. It's in the same stage as Mr. Marshall's application, so we'll have to come in front of this board for conditional use.
Assuming that's the direction and it's going to happen, and there is some kind of similarity between the way you manage a product for a manufacturer and a cultivator, at this time, would it be reasonable to expect that you would need additional mechanicals on the roof line for this second tenant?
I don't think so. I mean, the second tenant will likely have, not likely, the second tenant will have an odor mitigation plan that, as Andrew testified, is typically handled and mechanized within the space. But they will also have a heating and HVAC unit that we've conceived of in our plan to put them in that range. So there would be another unit on that same site. But again, we tried to size that to appropriately accommodate the mechanicals. I don't see them having a difference in mechanicals to what we're talking about.
Would there be condensers and odor removing and mitigation equipment on that roof line to accommodate this second time?
Just
client?
condensers.
Okay, so it's almost a given that there will be, if this is the type of business that moves into that location, there will be additional condensers required.
If any type of business moves into the
Okay.
location that requires central heating and air, which is the proposed mechanical system in the building, they will have a condenser in that location.
I wanted to clarify something, that inside the cultivator, that the plants will be grown in tables, a single level,
I'm gonna let Andrew answer that.
versus multiple tiers or a racking system
Sure.
in which plants are hydroponically grown.
Sure. So in the veg rooms, which I mentioned are like the nursery rooms where the plants go from clone up into flower stage, we plan to have vertical racks, 2 levels inside the veg rooms, single benches inside the flower rooms. I think we have a height clearance inside the rooms of, I think it's 11 feet, so that is part of the reason I didn't want to have double levels of 6-foot plants. It just didn't really work with the lights and the airflow inside the rooms. The lights generate too much heat, so we went with single benches in the main flower, and in the bedrooms there will be 1 double carriage rack.
So the building will not be reconstructed in a way where you can do vertical farming, like hydroponic farming.
It's vertical in the sense that the veg room will have a vertical rack, and it's vertical where it has 1 level yay high and another level that you access from a ladder.
It's a pretty tall building.
Right, but there's actually inside their building, there's a rafter system above the 11-foot clearance, so that's why we're not going above the 11 foot. So essentially, I mean, this seems pretty similar, but yeah, we only are able to do 1 double racked vertical.
And if you can picture the barrel, right, the highest point of it's in the direct center of the building, but then as you kind of scale down to the edge of the barrel, it gets lower. Andrew's space in the rear corner of the building has some of that condition already in it. We're not proposing to reframe that roof structure at all to go up.
So
or
you're
to-
not going vertical?
We are not. The roof is already on the building, that's already
Okay.
been correct.
I'm more familiar with hydrotronically grown vegetables, which are in racking systems that go 15 feet in the air.
Sure.
Right, yeah, it won't
Which
be like
is a way to
that.
grow a crop, and I wasn't sure if your building could accommodate that. Thank you.
Only in one tiny section of the building could that be possible.
This may be a simple question, but was there previously not HVAC in the structure?
There was, no, there were garage heaters, like the hanging ones off the poles, and there was no air conditioning. There were unit air conditioners, like window unit air conditioners within that office space, so where you see those two white windows on the front, there was actually one on Pine at one point. There was another one in those 3 window bays back, but there was no central air in the building and no central heating system.
Okay, thanks.
I have a quick question about the language in 281.1, maybe for Arthur. And 281.1 definitions minor site plan. A site plan of one or more lots excluding single families for approval of C, outdoor installation of power generator or condensing unit. So is outdoor considered to be on the ground, or is outdoor on the roof?
It's on the ground. We don't bring any, if you're putting rooftop condensers or rooftop equipment, have never said that requires site plan approval.
So that's not outdoor?
The way that we have always interpreted this ordinance is that when it's on the ground, that's when you trigger site plan. We don't trigger site plan approval with the installation of roof-mounted equipment.
Okay, I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Any other questions for the witness? All right, Counselor, I think we can put Mr. Steck on.
Thank you, Dave. If it pleases the board, we have Peter Steck, a professional planner. I believe he's familiar, but get him sworn.
We've never seen Mr. Steck before tonight. Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Peter G. Steck, 80 Maplewood Avenue, Maplewood, New Jersey. I'm a licensed planner in New Jersey, and my license is still in effect this evening.
Give it time.
We better get this in quick, then.
I have
And we will accept Mr. Steck as a...
Thank
as
you.
an
I have
expert
additional
planner.
copies of his plan. It didn't go out with the packet, but it was brought in as an exhibit. I don't know if, do you need to mark it as an exhibit, or you had it ahead of time?
I don't know that I've ever seen that.
Okay.
I'll mark this as A8.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I need one, two, so.
Thank you.
Mr. Steck, thank you for being here. You have reviewed the application and visited the property and are familiar with the ordinances of the town?
Yes.
Yes, and I'm going to ask you your opinion on the conditional use application and let you go.
Yes. So a little background is these ordinances are fairly fresh. The municipality amended its zoning ordinance in 2021. And that your ordinance now has a definition of a cannabis supplier, and we fit that definition. The municipality amended its C2 zone to list cannabis establishments other than retailers as a conditional use in this zone. And in accordance with the municipal land use law, the conditions are supposed to be fairly definitive so that an applicant can come before the planning board, demonstrate compliance, and essentially gain the status of what would otherwise be a permitted use. So the conditions in the ordinance are easily met. Again, we're in the proper zone. We are not on Walnut Street. No part of the property touches Walnut Street. We're on Pine Street. We are not an alternate treatment center. We're just a growing facility. And there's a reference to section 347-17.2 that has some protections in it. It says that we're not allowed as a home occupation, and there's no residential use in this building. We're not housed in a vehicle or any movable structure, so they didn't want deliveries to your door of, I guess, a manufacturing plant, which is clearly the case here. There is a buffer zone, not in the sense of landscaping, but there's a requirement that you can't be within 250 feet of a school or a licensed daycare center. So the diagram that I prepared on the left-hand side colors in the portion of the building that will be occupied by this use. I drew a red line, which is the access point to the facility, and that's where I drew my 250-foot radius, which is colored in red. And there are no schools or daycare centers within that radius. So technically, we meet the standards of your conditional use issue. I know that the issue of site plan approval has been lurking there. And the evidence presented, at least in terms of the historical approach to this, is that this doesn't trigger a site plan approval. If we had a use that required more parking, office use, we would have to automatically come in. If we put a generator on the grounds, logically we would have to come in. Keep in mind there are state noise regulations that you're not grandfathered in. If any time in the future the noise at the residential property line exceeds the state standard, we can be nailed. There can be a complaint through a county noise officer. So there are protections, but this is a highly regulated use, as the board has discovered. State, municipality, and conditional use. There are multiple stages here. We're before you to demonstrate that we meet the conditions in the ordinance for this use. I believe we met the conditions. So there's not like a variance, there's not relief that has to be proved. We have to simply demonstrate that we meet the conditions, and they're easily recognized conditions, and I think we meet them.
And that conclusion's based on the application that was put in and the testimony that was given this evening?
Yes, and my inspection of the area by looking at the state site for licensing daycare centers, and they're all the sensitive uses are more than 1,000 feet away. The test in your ordinance is from the door 250 feet.
Mr. Steck's available for questions.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, I actually should have asked this a while ago. Are the garage doors on the front of the building? Oh, I'm sorry. Are the garage doors on the front of the building going to stay?
I believe architecturally they are going to stay.
So they won't be used to drive in and out of the building anymore?
We can bring the owner up, that's not really.
The owner can come in, but my understanding is the uses that are anticipated don't necessarily need interior parking.
Just wondering if you get some parking on the street there instead of having that big curb
No, there's
cut.
no parking on that side.
Yeah.
It's only on the other side of the street that
okay.
parking is
Right.
permitted today.
And I think the testimony earlier was, and if not, it's from a discussion I had with the owner earlier, that front and left, those two, one's not really a bay anymore, but those front left two, that's the portion of the property that's still vacant, that he doesn't know what tenant is coming in for. So I think they're reluctant to change it because they don't know what's going to be needed by that, whoever ends up there.
Thank you.
Other questions of Mr. Steck from the board? Any questions of Mr. Steck from the public concerning his testimony? All right, thank you, Mr. Steck.
Can I just ask one more question of David? Do you have any intention of doing any landscaping around the property? It's pretty barren.
We do. I don't have a good sense of
Not
exactly
yet.
what our plan is, but when we're finished up here, especially on the north side where we have about 3 or 4 feet between the two properties and no fence and all the way back, we plan to do some landscaping upgrades there. But the site is mostly impervious. There's not a ton of planting areas.
At the risk
that
of,
it?
yeah, I just, really quick summary.
Well, before you
Sure.
provide a summary, is there any member of the public who wishes to make a statement about the application based on what they've heard this evening? Please come forward.
Don't worry, Andrew. In all seriousness, when we got our notice, my first reaction is I was coming tonight as an objector. However, Mr. Marshall has done everything I would expect a good neighbor to do. He has reached out to all of us. I met with Mr. Marshall with my colleague, and we pummeled him with questions. It was around security, odor mitigation, trash collection, and operation. And he answered all those questions that day or did his homework, and then he answered them tonight. And that's what I want from a neighbor. He's a local man. He's an entrepreneur. And I like this application for the following reason. One, Andrew did his homework. He wants to be a good neighbor, and I am convinced that he'll continue to be a good neighbor. And there's always that problems that arise, but how do you handle those problems? I'm confident that he will do that. His grow operation is going to be organic, which I think is important and part of the ethos of our town. One of the things that I'm very impressed with, he's going to be hiring special needs adults, which I think is a very important thing. He's reached out to nonprofit organizations, as you heard Mr. Scott testify to. I think this is an excellent use for the property. It's a better use than has existed for many, many years. I think it's a benefit to the neighborhood. I think it's a benefit to Montclair. It will generate fees, and I hope this board supports it. Mr. Genova will probably come back and have to have a site plan, but that's for another night, a different case. Thank you for your time.
I'm Susan Friedman. I live at 150 Pine Street, which again is that building right next to the parking lot. I've sensed some frustration, actually, even from you all, about how there seems to be a disconnect between what the concerns are and what we're really here to do, what you're supposed to be here to do. And I get that. I'm actually not unsupportive of the use itself, and the concerns I had about smell and noise have been mitigated to a great extent by what the testimony has been tonight. But I still am a little concerned, and I just want to say this is a concern that is probably beyond what's happening, the scope of what's happening tonight, but I'm hoping that you guys will take into consideration the fact that I don't see how it's possible to avoid the fact that there's going to be more noise and more light and more issues for the neighbors because of the uses that are going to be used for this building. And I don't know how that's going to be addressed. This is already a very dense area, right? There's the CVS on one side, there's the gas station, they all put out a lot of light. There's the train, there's the ambulances, this is not a quiet neighborhood. And we knew, when you move into this neighborhood, you know that. But this is a more intense amplification of this being less of a neighborhood and more of a commercial zone. And I'm just hoping that as you assess, especially I'm concerned about the condensers and the stuff on the roof, we're much higher next door, so even if there's a fence, we're going to see all that equipment. And I really don't know how we're not going to hear all that equipment as it cycles on and cycles off. So I'm hoping that somehow that the board can take into consideration when you make decisions in the future, which may have nothing to do with whether you approve this use, that you are taking into consideration how that's going to impact what is really a residential neighborhood. I mean, 50 years ago, this was more of an industrial neighborhood, or even 75 years ago. And I have to say, the cheese making, it goes back 40 years. I mean, there was no cheese making. 25 years ago when I was living there, Mr. Zenza, who owned that building, was at that point in his 80s. He was not making cheese there anymore. He was futzing in the back. He had he had his own little experiments that he was doing back there, but he had no employees. He had no, he built machines that made cheese, right? That was his business. And he sold those parts and those things that he developed to make cheese, but he was not making cheese back there. And at the point, 25 years ago, when I moved into that building, he was the only person who was back there. There was no employees, there was no people coming in and out, there was no trucks coming in and out, there was nothing. My building was a factory. There used to be a coal factory. All this stuff is gone. This is all now residential or office buildings or retail. So what you're doing basically is putting a business in the middle of what is really a residential area. In fact, I mean, it's zoned how it's zoned, and there's nothing we can do about that, but that's not really what it is anymore. What it was back however many years ago that it was commercial, that it was industrial. So I'm just asking the board to take all those things into consideration when you think about how close all the real people who are living in that community are.
Just one similar comment. There's nothing that can be done about it, of course, with these zoning laws. When my house was built in 1925, there was no zoning. You could do anything you wanted, anywhere you wanted. But the idea of having a manufacturing facility in a suburban neighborhood, it won't happen on Upper Mountain Avenue, but it will happen on Pine Street.
So just to add on to the pile, the question tonight is rather cut and dry. It sounds like we have a good tenant that is doing everything that we can. The bigger questions are for the landlord. Will the landlord be as good a neighbor as the tenant is trying to be? Regretfully, isn't the question for tonight. The question for tonight is about the tenant, and it seems like, I read his letter when we got it in the mail, and I recognize somebody who has a lot of passion for their idea, a lot of passion for their business, and is trying to do everything right. It's wonderful. I'm nervous about parking. I'm nervous about noise. I look out on this building, and we had a good business there before. We're getting another, what seems to be a good business in there now. But I think we need to just you need to keep your eyes open and your ears open for what the landlord's going to be doing moving forward. But for our purposes tonight, we came here with questions, they were answered. They were answered thoroughly and with great detail, and for that, I'm grateful. So I guess it's stay tuned. We'll all be back, and it will be a different person sitting there for a lot longer. So we'll bring some coffee, but thank you for everything you did tonight.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, again, William Scott. I just really wanted to thank Mr. Marshall for his professionalism. For a young guy, I believe 27 years old, from the outset when I had conversations with him, his interest, his commitment to the community, it just really said a lot about his character. To me, he seems a lot older in wisdom than 27 years old, to be quite honest. And then I'll also speak to the fact that I've also known Mr. Dave, quite a bit, because he's come before the he's come before the Housing Commission with major development, and he was always respective. He met his commitment for affordable housing, so he has some significance and trustworthy commitments that he has made when it came to affordable housing. So I've dealt with him when I was the co-chair of the Montclair Housing Commission. So for two young businessmen in the township of Montclair, I'm hoping that we have a new group of developers coming into town and business people. So I supported the fact that this being an application, it would be an initial application and a business person that is making a commitment to affordable housing. And I believe, and Janet, you correct me if I'm wrong, the first to establish a 10-year commitment. Yes, $15,000, $150,000, and that could be $250,000 10 years from now or $1 million from now. So I think that that's significant, and I hope other developers and individuals that might be in this business make that commitment to affordable housing in the township of Montclair, because we have a long conversation about affordable housing in Montclair. We need more, and we need to find as many sources as possible to bring that to the township. And I thank Mr. Marshall for doing that.
Anyone else? All right, Council.
I think I'm happy to end on that note.
Good decision. All right. So as we approach the 10 o'clock hour, I won't.
How subtle.
I won't beat around the bush. I think that as the members of the community recognize that we really don't have too much of a choice here. The applicant has put forth a good case with respect to not only meeting the conditions, but showing consideration over and above and beyond that. And so, with respect to granting the conditional use, I think that it's a matter of, like I said, we have no choice. So I would recommend that, and will move that the board grant the application. With that said, we, the board, have had a level of frustration with respect to the other issues that we've discussed this evening. Part of the purpose of discussing them is to get them out on the table, and for everybody to understand that these issues have not gone unrecognized, but the way that our current ordinances are structured, they're not things that we can deal with this evening. And we really can't even commit to saying that it's a stay tuned to, see what happens next, and that somebody else might be back here. If the property owner manages to bring other tenants on board that are fairly conservative with their needs, he may not get to the point where he needs to have a site plan approval. We will see what happens, but certainly I think that everybody's acting in good faith, and that the property owner has indicated that he understands certainly the community's interest in the property, and perhaps he understands it a little better this evening. I don't know, but we can't deal with that at this point. We'll see what happens in the future with the other tenants that may or may not come into the property. There aren't any conditions that go along with my motion to approve the conditional use. And would anybody else like to be heard?
I want to say three things, two of them to Mr. Marshall and one of them to our planner and council. I am unalterably opposed to what you are doing for reasons that have nothing to do with you and are irrelevant to our consideration of your application this evening. That being said, I do very much appreciate the way that you've gone about coming to town with this plan. And so my problems with your business aside, I have no problems with you, and I have no problems with the way that you have come in. I think that, you know, anybody opening a business in Montclair should do it the way you're doing it, and I applaud that. And so, you know, those are the two things I wanted to say to you. With regard to this process, for the sake of my blood pressure, if all they need to do is come in with this, when we hear these plans and we hear all the concerns about security, we hear all these concerns about other things, we hear all these concerns about what purpose does it serve to come in and have the applicant do this, and we ask all these questions and we spend 2.5 hours when we're just rubber stamping this, which is fine. If that's what the law is, that's what the law is. But what is the point of these hearings?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
On one hand, the point is that this is what the municipal land use law says that we've got to do. We've got to have a hearing. Certain things have to be established on the record, evidentiary,
Right, but
so
that was
so
done.
that we can make, and that requires testimony. It doesn't, and it requires not just expert testimony. It requires testimony from the applicant.
Fair enough.
The major, and granted, a lot of the conversation this evening, a lot of the discussion this evening may not have been directed towards that point, but clearly the community has a lot of concern. And part of the things that we serve, part of the purpose that we serve, part of the things that we do in our hearings is try and educate the public in general so that they understand how the law works, what the limitations are, and then by understanding the limitations, if they're dissatisfied with them, then they can take it to the council and maybe get some change. But what we have found over the years is that a lot of people don't understand the fine points of the municipal land use law, don't understand the fine points of what the planning board can and cannot do. So we've tried to add this component onto them. And yes, it takes a little bit more time, but I think that the members of the audience in their statements have reflected that they understand things that they didn't understand walking in the door. And, you know, at least one gentleman says his opinion has evolved after understanding and hearing that basically there's nothing that we can do here. Things have to take place in other venues. And so that's kind of part of why we do it, and I'm sorry about your blood pressure.
At the expense of my sanity, but
I'm
I got
sorry
it.
about
Okay.
your blood pressure. I take medication for that. So maybe.
and some more of it's going to be for sale. So
Also, if we only
adding
had
on
one
to-
piece of paper, we'd be here at midnight. At least we had some paper that we could look at, right?
Adding on to what the chair has said, this whole regulatory scheme with the cannabis is new. And the communities, as Mr. Mack said, you know, they're having difficulty assimilating these new regulations. So boards like this perform the very function that the chair has indicated, educating or allowing us as a board to be educated, but also allowing the public to be
Yeah.
educated.
And someone who lives in the neighborhood, I'm particularly interested in being educated. And once again, I applaud all the work that you've done on this and how, you know, you really did do your homework and convinced us this is not going to be adversely affect the neighbors, we hope. I'd like to say to David, though.
Which we wouldn't have gotten, by the way, if we had just had that piece of paper.
Right. I'd just like to say to David, as a resident of the neighborhood and all the other my neighbors here, I do hope that you will try to, you know, take their concerns into account, because it really is, when you have this noise, like right across the street from your apartment, or you're walking by a building that really needs to be made more attractive, or you have parking that's like scattered all over the place that takes up spaces perhaps that, you know, the neighbors could have used, that's a detriment. And I hope that you'll do what you can. I know that you've done nice work in other buildings, and we hope that you'll do, I'm confident you will do a nice job here, for me alone.
Can I second John's motion? Did you make a motion?
Yes.
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very
Good
much
luck.
for your time.
Thank you.
So you're good. You're good tonight.
Eliminating superintendent.
I was hoping that we get out of here. No, we do have bills. We do have bills to pay, don't we? No, we've got everything. No, I thought I had seen something.
Ms. Talley, are there bills? I didn't see any bills.
No, there were no bills.
Then
I think we have nothing else. So
I think
motion-
we have a motion from Mr. Jacobson, second by the chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we're done.